The Assad regime in Syria has fallen. There are many stakeholders who are now looking at how to secure their own interests with Assad gone. Golan Heights, a very important and critical area for Israel. How is Israel trying to secure itself? How are the neighboring countries now going to secure themselves? What is Iran's stake? To discuss all this and more at a time when West Asia crisis is only getting bigger and bigger, I'm being joined by security expert Rohan Gunaratna, who has traveled widely in West Asia, has worked very closely and engaged very closely with various stakeholders in the region, and has been joining us to break down the details of what this crisis, what the conflict, and what war really means, not just for the region, but for the world. Rohan, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Let's begin with Assad's regime fall. How did that really happen? While many think it's sudden, it wasn't. What were the markers that led to Bashar al-Assad having to leave his country, flee his country, and now is sitting in Moscow?
Bashar al-Assad was a very powerful leader because he got more than 90% of the vote. But what happened was during the Arab Spring, there was a huge protest against him. And some of the protesters and some of the protests were funded by the West. And Bashar al-Assad used extraordinary force against these protesters. And that strengthened demonstrators, and they received funding, weapons, and support from neighboring and distant countries.
Right.
So gradually, this protest that was non-violent became a very violent protest. There was the formation of threat groups, and these groups eventually, with the assistance of other geopolitical actors, were able to overwhelm his security apparatus and seize power in Syria.
Who are the players over here? We're talking about, on the one hand, a very small minority Shia Alawite community that controlled, which is where what Bashar al Assad also belongs to, which controlled the whole of Syria. And then we had the rebel forces, primarily Sunni Muslims, who also got a lot of support from the other side. And many call them, in many ways, a part of the Islamic State. So when they cross the border to the other side, they become terrorists. And when they're in Syria for the West, they become freedom fighters.
Bashar al-Assad was supported by the Russian regime. So the Russians provided very significant assistance. The Russians had both an air base and a naval base. Russia had access to the Mediterranean, their warm water port. And I also want to share with you that the Americans established a presence in Syria because ISIS was operating. Then, but the turning point was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi sent his representative, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, to Syria. And Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, he formed an Al-Qaeda aligned group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And now what we have seen is Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, who was sent by the ISIS leader, is now called the president of Syria. So he has united a number of factions, and he is currently leading the resistance, the fight against the Syrian regime that has crumbled, and he is going after those remnant pockets. And it's a question of time that he will consolidate and become the dominant player in Syria.
Okay. Um, Now the system is in absolute disarray. There is no government. There is the prime minister who's not left Syria. He's insisting on a transition, a smooth transition where nobody's hurt. We have seen a lot of videos come out where there are celebrations, a lot of videos come out where there are concerns. People are leaving Syria. People who left Syria because of Assad are going back to Syria. So it's a mixed bag of reactions when it comes to Syria. A lot of concerns with regards to what will happen in the future, Rohan.
What we have seen is that Bashar al-Assad's prime minister, a man called Muhammad Ghazi al-Jalili, he remained back. He remained in the capital of Damascus, and he communicated to the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, that he is willing to support the transition, but he is very keen that there are elections in Syria so that there will be a multi-party government. But I do not know whether a jihadist group leader like Abu Muhammad al-Jolani will agree to that. I mean to say, the Taliban in Afghanistan said that they are going to have a multi-party government, but eventually Taliban started to rule Afghanistan by themselves. So these threat groups, especially the Sunni jihadi groups, can never be trusted because they have constantly gone back on their word. I have no doubt, looking at the trajectory of Abu Muhammad al Jolani, where he has repeatedly said that Christians and non Muslims have no place in Syria, whether he will build a multi party government. So, in many ways, Iran sponsored Bashar al Assad Syrian regime has now been replaced by a Sunni Islamist and a jihadist regime. And I think that this will create insecurity for Syria because there will be infighting. Last night, uh, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham attacked the Kurds, threatened the
Right.
Kurds, and also the countries in the immediate neighborhood, that is Jordan, Lebanon, and even Israel. These countries are very worried of the developments at this point in Syria.
Right. Um, Rohan, explain the lay of the land for us. You just spoke about the bordering countries. There are conspiracy theorists who would say that there is an involvement of U.S. To a certain extent, Russia pulling out, an agreement with Assad leaving and going to Moscow, but also Turkey, and that and Israel, and everybody knows exactly what they want from Syria. Are we looking at disintegration of Syria at this point in time?
Syria certainly is fragmented, but I want to share with you that people should not subscribe to conspiracy theories that HTS, Hayat Tahrir al Sham, is backed by the United States. It is not. Hayat Tahrir al Sham has been traditionally supported by Turkey, and certainly the Americans are not behind HTS because they have a reward that is
A
they
$10
are
billion
calling for a
bounty, yes.
absolutely they have a reward for anyone who will either provide information or will get rid of uh, Abu Abu Muhammad al Jolani. Certainly, Abu Muhammad al Jolani is against Iran because he has been fighting the Shia militia. He has been fighting ISIS, and he will fight the neighboring countries. It's a question of time because if you look at the name of his group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Sham means the region that includes Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Syria, so Iraq. So what's going to happen is his fighters, I have watched them when they occupied the central mosque in Syria, they said that we have now liberated Syria and we are going to liberate Jerusalem. And after Jerusalem, they said we are going to Mecca and Medina. So certainly the message of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is very worrying, not only for the countries in the immediate neighborhood, but also Saudi Arabia. I also want to share with you that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has modeled itself after Taliban. So Taliban is its model, very much the same way Taliban prepared for their 2021 invasion and capture of power in Kabul. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham also created military academies, created specialist regimes for specialist functions, from artillery to mortars to drones. And so they are emulating the group that seized power in Afghanistan, and they were able to capture power in Syria using the same model.
Where were they based? How did they get the kind of is it only Turkey get the kind of high tech weapon systems that they have? And are they going to be expansionists in their policy and agenda?
Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a very well-structured group and a very well-equipped group. If you look at their uniforms, they are wearing
Yes.
the best uniforms, brand new uniforms, their boots, their weaponry, um, their communications equipment. So you can say very clearly that it is one of the best funded groups. In the case of Taliban, after they captured power in Afghanistan, they were able to gain access to what the Americans left behind. But in this case, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham was already very well equipped at the time they moved from Idlib, where their headquarters is, went to Aleppo, and then across three other cities moved to Damascus. And they were certainly supported by Turkey, and it is also very likely that they were supported by Qatar.
That's very interesting. Um, the fact that you said that the idea of the group of HTS is also to expand, and that they're not going to stop at Syria. The first thing that they said was Jerusalem. Is that the reason why Israel considers this a major threat? Because now the entire equilibrium has been shaken. And the reason why Israel is first trying to target all the critical infrastructure within Syria so it does not fall into what they call the wrong hands.
You are very well informed. Last night, the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, together with his defense minister, they developed a new strategy that is to create a buffer zone beyond the Golan Heights. That is, Israel controls a territory called the Golan Heights, which
Yes.
is annexed from Syria. Now, Israel has created two zones. One is the buffer zone, which they are going to dominate, and another zone called the safe space, where they are not going to allow HTS or any other entity to have heavy weapons or capabilities that can attack Israel. So today, Israel started operations both in the buffer zone as well as taking on more than 100 targets inside Syria. They attacked a number of capabilities, and I would like to share with you that these capabilities will, in many ways, it will help Israel to protect itself, because what we have seen is that Israel is very worried about the anti-missile systems that Assad had, and that they would fall into the hands of HTS. But other than that, they have attacked mortars, artillery, other coastal weapons, as well as missiles and other capabilities that can pose a direct threat uh, to the security and stability of Israel.
Right. In terms of the structure within, now we're looking at a fragmented society, and right now we have not heard of many incidents per se. But do you think, Rohan, that this is going to escalate in terms of the domestic chaos and crisis into persecution of now what would actually be called the minorities, the Alawite Shias?
The communities that will be targeted by the Sunni jihadists will be the Shiites, the Alawites, the Druze, the Christians, and any other non Muslim, non Sunni community. So I think that there must be an umbrella to protect those communities. That is one. Because already last night, HTS started to threaten and harass and target some of the Kurds. So I think that this will be their practice because this is their ideology. It will be very difficult for them to move beyond. And if you saw the video, one of the HTS members goes to a mosque and he says that our next destination is Jerusalem and after that Mecca. So I think that it's very difficult to change the thinking, behavior, and the actions of those who have been indoctrinated over a very long period of time. So they will do exactly what they have been trained to do. Not only that, a number of foreign fighters have moved to join HTS. This includes nationals from South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, from Africa, from Europe, and North America. So I believe that those nationals will eventually, when they return back to their own countries, they will either conduct attacks or they will try to change their regimes. So about 5 to 6,000 members of HTS are foreign terrorist fighters, and the security and intelligence services are aware of some of those fighters. So it is very important for governments around the world to be alert and vigilant and to prevent the recruitment of this group online and to prevent the safe passage of their own nationals to Syria, either through Lebanon or through Turkey or through Jordan
Right.
or through the Mediterranean Sea.
Right. Rohan, just looking at what was at play over here. What happened to the Russians? They were there. They had the bases there. They were stationed in one of the bases. They had soldiers on the ground. What happened? You might say that, they were more focused on Ukraine, but they already had forces here. Did they withdraw because they knew something was happening? Or did they withdraw later? What happened?
The Russians were under severe pressure to support Bashar al Assad because it was Russia that rescued Bashar al Assad in the past. But this time, the Russian troops were very thin in Syria because they had deployed very significantly to fight in the Ukrainian war. And the Russian capabilities, their offensive and defensive weapon systems were deployed on the Ukrainian front. So they were not able to provide significant assistance beyond the 2nd of December in Aleppo. So HTS used hypermobile warfare and moved very quickly from Aleppo to Damascus through two other cities. Similarly, Iran was a state sponsor of the Bashar al Assad regime. Iran deployed not only its most powerful force, which is the Lebanese Hezbollah in the past, but Lebanese Hezbollah was decimated or virtually crippled by the IDF, the Israeli forces.
Right.
So that didn't work. And similarly, IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the fighting wing of the external operations wing of Iran, IRGC Al Quds, had a number of militias in Iraq that they were planning to deploy, and some of them were sent across the border. But again, they were fought very effectively and they were deterred. And the Shia militia in Syria, they didn't fight. They just decided to withdraw. So, in my personal view, what happened was the unintended consequence of Israel's operation. So, Israel decimated Lebanese Hezbollah to protect Israel because Hezbollah has been firing rockets at Israel since October 8th, 2023. And also, the Israelis decided to cut the pipeline, the weapon pipeline from Iran through Iraq through Syria. And in that process, they killed a very large number, killed, maimed, and injured a very large number of Shia fighters, both in Iraq and in Syria. So all this contributed to the weakening of the Bashar al-Assad regime.
That's very interesting. But again, if we look at the map, Rohan, we're looking at the map over here, and for Iran, because you mentioned Iran, let's just talk about Iran's strategy. For Iran, Syria and Lebanon are two very critical and crucial countries. Distance is a problem for Iran when it comes to Israel, and doing any damage to Israel would require countries that are connected to Israel or adjacent to Israel in terms of land. And that's where Syria and Lebanon have always come in. What happens now for Iran?
You are absolutely correct. The way Iran defends itself, the way Iran protects itself is it has a security architecture called the Ring of Fire, or you can also call it the octopus.
Hmm.
So Iran has supported and funded in the past the Bashar al-Assad government. It continues to support the Lebanese Hezbollah. It supports the Ansarullah in Yemen. It supported Hamas, Palestine Islamic Jihad, and Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, both in Gaza and in West Bank. Of course, Iran itself has its own capabilities that it has used against Israel. But these capabilities have been very severely damaged because Israel was able to mount incessant operations against constant and continuous operations to degrade the infrastructure of Ansarullah, Hamas, PIJ, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, and also the Lebanese Hezbollah. And now the presence of those groups that threatens Israel has been very severely weakened. And Israel believes that when Trump comes to power, it wants to attack and degrade the nuclear capabilities of Israel. It could very well do that because Trump himself doesn't want Iran to have a fully capable nuclear weapon. So the global security environment is going to radically change with Donald J. Trump becoming the president in January 20th, 2025.
Right. Rohan, the fact that there has been a very significant polarization, so to say, or polar opposite position taken by certain quarters when it is the West. They've been absolutely against Assad or Iran, or for that matter, this entire axis. But countries that maybe have had problems with each other, India, China, for example, have been on the same page on the very same issues in West Asia. Russia, India, China, when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to the Israel Palestine conflict, they have seen things very differently. And they are on the same page or have been on the same page on Syria, especially. How do you see this entire global geopolitics now play out when we're looking at a Syria that's going to become yet another point of geopolitical rivalry?
Russia, Iran, Pakistan has taken a certain stand. We have also seen that the United States, Europe, Israel has taken a stand. In the case of India, it is working with Iran, working with Russia, and working with the West, because India has developed what is called a multi-directional foreign policy. That is, for its benefit, for its growth, India will work with its old friend Russia, and also work with the Americans and the Europeans and other countries. So I think that there is today a huge debate in the polarizing and fragmenting international community how they should conduct themselves. And with Trump uh, emerging as the next president of the United States, I think Trump himself will realize that he cannot threaten BRICS, because BRICS will be a very powerful entity. So I think there will be many discussions around how the transition is going to be from that unipolar to the multipolar world.
Right.
My personal view is that the way to manage this is governments should be able to deal with any country they want for their growth and their benefit and their development.
That's interesting. But again, Rohan, before I let you go, there are some critical questions that still are left unanswered. What happens to Assad? Is this the end game for him? How long can he really stay or continue staying in Russia?
Assad had a very small community of Alawites supporting him at the time he left. He had lost very significant support among the Sunnis and even among very significant segment of the Shia community. So his popularity declined from 90% to about 20%. Right now, he's in Russia. The Russians will give him asylum and he will remain there. But the developments in Syria is a very important reminder for the West and for the rest of the world. The West didn't like dictators. The West got rid of Saddam Hussein, and who was a dictator. He's not an Islamist. He hated the Islamists. He was not in bed with Abu Musab al-Zakawi, as some alleged. And when Saddam was got rid of, what happened in Iraq, it became a center point for the terrorists. ISIS emerged. Similarly, in Libya, the West got rid of Gaddafi, who was fighting Islamism, fighting the jihadists. And today, not only Libya, but the threat has cascaded from Libya to Niger, Chad, Mali, Mauritania. Entire North Africa and the Sahel has been destabilized. The same way the threat spread from Iraq to Syria. Then, of course, Mubarak, the West got rid of Mubarak. Muslim Brotherhood came to power. It's an Islamist organization that destabilized Egypt completely. So I think key lesson today is that the Western style democracies should not be imposed especially in Middle East and North Africa, because these countries have very old cultures. If they are becoming democratic, it will take a long time. So I think that this experimentation of supporting protests, experimentation of supporting groups, experimentation of supporting protest opposition movements will have huge national security implications, international security implications. So it's a lesson for everyone to learn that as we move to 2025, that we have to protect our nation states, and we must make sure that these non-state armed groups are kept under very tight control. And even more importantly, these groups that are religious fanatics have no place in history, because if you give a place even a little bit of space, if you do open the door a little bit, religious fanatic will come and occupy the hall, and from the hall he will take control of the house, and then the village, and then the town, and then the city. So I think that it is very important for governments to control and contain religious extremism and groups driven by religious extremism.
But for now, it is end of the road for Assad, is it not?
Yes, certainly. He cannot return back because he doesn't have the political support and he doesn't have the military support. So he will gradually fade away.
Um, you think the Russians are not going to look at, because the stakes are very high to not have your space in this part of the world, especially when they had it so good here in Syria. You don't think that the Russians will try to bring about changes again?
Russia will want to keep its air base and its military base because it has access to the Mediterranean. It's using that air base uh, to dominate and to conduct various operations in Africa. And I think that both the air and the naval base are very important for the Russians. So Russia will try to reach agreement and even do a deal with the new powers in Syria. For Russia, it is very important that they maintain access to the Mediterranean and maintain a base from which they can operate in Africa.
Now, coming to Syria, sorry, Israel, Rohan, just final words from you. Israel has started and opened up another front. Do you think Israel can sustain so many a multi-pronged, multi-front war when they already are fighting the Hezbollah? In fact, Netanyahu came out and said that it was their attack against Hezbollah that has led to uh, the fall of Assad as well. So, opening up so many fronts, do you think that works in their favor at all?
The linchpin of Bashar al-Assad was the Hezbollah. They were his shock troops. So Netanyahu's statement is correct. But Israel will continue to fight uh, on those seven fronts. Uh, Other than Gaza, West Bank, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and also Iran itself. But as you know, no country can sustain a war perennially. It will not do well for the economy or the security or stability of Israel. So at some point, Israel will strike Iran, and it is very likely it will happen early next year, and it will deter Iran to a point of supporting these groups. And of course, Israel will continue to periodically attack those threat entities that are building capabilities to attack Israel, because Israel's military strategy or doctrine is one of deterrence. So, in my personal opinion, the threat that Israel is facing will diminish with Trump coming to office, because Trump will better equip and resource Israel, and the US forces itself will provide intelligence and operational capabilities to Israel to better protect itself and advance Western interests in the Middle East.
Right. Now, before I let you go, uh, we see a bounty of $10 million for Mohammed al-Jalali by the United States of America. Is that the same for Israel? Is he considered terrorist by Israel as well?
Abu Muhammad al Jolani is certainly a terrorist that Israel will target,
They
and
will.
sooner or later,
He's just taking over Syria. They'll target him.
absolutely, they will go after him. The Israeli strategy is always to rise and kill. That is, before the enemy attacks you, to strike.
Right.
And of course, the Hamas attack clearly demonstrated that Israel didn't do it once and they paid a very heavy price. Israel this time will remain a proactive, forward looking, capable entity that will vanquish the HTS leadership.
On that note, Rohan Gunaratna, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Geeta.